You guys have been asking me a lot how to actually level up your functional power and animal movement strength using the kind of training this channel was built on. Not the watered-down gym version people post for likes, the real gorilla crawl workout, the full science. So I spent the last week doing exactly that. 7 straight days of gorilla crawls. I tracked every session. I measured the mobility data, and what I found inside those numbers and inside my own body is going to permanently change how you think about building real primal strength. Here's what I want to be clear about before we go anywhere. This is not a look what I did video. This is a full breakdown of the animal locomotion science behind one of the most underrated functional movement patterns on the planet, the mechanics, the neuroscience, the daily physiological shifts, and why it works the way it does. Because here is what most fitness content will never say out loud. The gorilla crawl is not an exercise. It is a diagnostic tool for exactly how broken modern life has made your body. And once you feel that, training is never the same again. This is Primal Unleashed. This is the silverback standard. Modern life makes us soft. Primal movement makes us unbreakable. We don't just lift weight, we reclaim our nature. Let's get into day 0. The baseline and the primal promise. Day 0. Before a single rep, I documented where I actually was, and I want you doing the same thing right now alongside me, because what I'm about to show you only becomes useful when you have your own numbers sitting next to mine. My day 0 numbers. Hip flexor mobility, restricted, measurably. For someone who talks about functional movement training professionally, that should tell you something about what 11 hours of daily sitting does to even the people trying to fight it. Thoracic rotation, limited on the left. Wrist load tolerance under full body weight. 40 seconds before the joint said no. 40 seconds. I want something from you right now in the comments. Write down your single biggest mobility pain point, the thing your body does that makes you feel a decade older than you are. Is it your hips, your thoracic spine, your shoulders locking when you reach overhead? Write it down. By the time this video ends, you'll know whether 7 days of this specific movement pattern actually solves those issues, not in theory, but in documented real-world time. Now, let me give you the 2026 context, because this framing matters. The average knowledge worker in 2026 spends 11 hours a day in body positions that are mechanically hostile to human design. Tech neck, anterior pelvic tilt, compressed hip flexors, deactivated glutes. We are, as a species, the stiffest dominant animal that has ever walked this planet. The fossil record shows more spinal variation in ancient hominids than your average open-plan office today. Meanwhile, watch a silverback gorilla move across uneven terrain, that fluid weight-shifting knuckle-powered locomotion, every joint loaded, every stabilizer firing, the entire kinetic chain operating as one integrated unit. From a biomechanics standpoint, it is one of the most efficient and powerful movement patterns in nature. Here's what I call the primal promise of gorilla crawls. 7 days of consistent, intentional gorilla crawling will wake up the stabilizer muscles your body has switched off. The deep rotator cuff, the serratus anterior, the hip external rotators. These are muscles that do not respond to traditional barbell loading. They respond to weight shifting across unstable planes, exactly what this movement demands. If you're watching right now and want to run this experiment alongside me, drop a gorilla emoji in the comments. That's your day 1 commitment. The thread is your accountability wall. Now let's talk about what is actually happening inside your body during this movement, because this is where animal locomotion science gets genuinely fascinating. The gorilla crawl is a contralateral movement pattern. Your right hand and left foot move together, followed by your left hand and right foot. You are crossing the midline of your body with every single step, and from a neurological standpoint, that is extraordinary. Contralateral movement patterns are among the most powerful activators of cross-hemispheric brain communication we know of. Your cerebellum, the coordination center, fires bilaterally during cross-lateral locomotion. Your corpus callosum, the bridge connecting both hemispheres, is forced into active coordination with every rep. In plain terms, crawling makes your nervous system more intelligent. This is not a fitness marketing claim. This is established neuroscience. And what I noticed by day 2 was exactly this effect. Movements I performed in other training, kettlebell flows, plyometric sequences, started feeling sharper, more automatic. Motor learning transfer from a crawl pattern to everything else. It happened fast. Now, the knuckle walking position. This is where gorilla crawls diverge sharply from a standard bear crawl and where most people get the mechanics wrong. When you shift a knuckle contact with the floor, two things happen simultaneously. First, the wrist loads in neutral extension rather than the hyperextended position that destroys most people who try floor-based training. Second, you stack the elbow directly under the shoulder, creating vertical force transfer through bone rather than connective tissue. Mechanically more efficient, also far more demanding on the deep forearm flexors and the intrinsic hand muscles. By day 3, my forearms were communicating things to me I had not heard from that tissue in years. I want the climbers and gymnasts watching right now to do something for this community. You already live in contralateral movement worlds. What are your wrist strengthening protocols? Drop them in the thread below. I want that comment section to become the best wrist resilience resource anywhere on this platform. And while you're thinking, here's a question I'm planting right now that I'll answer shortly. Which muscle group do you think failed on me first? Quads, shoulders, or core? Drop your guess. I'll give you the answer in a few minutes, and I guarantee most of you are wrong. Navigating the midpoint struggle. Day 4. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened without the usual fitness content polish. It wasn't the muscle soreness that almost broke this experiment. I expected soreness. It was the nervous system. By day 4, there was a full body fatigue that had nothing to do with any specific muscle, systemic heaviness, slowness behind the eyes. My body had sent a clear memo upstairs saying we need to renegotiate the terms of this agreement. This is neurofatigue accumulation, and it is something that most functional movement content never addresses. Your nervous system is the engine for all of this. When you are acquiring a demanding new motor pattern, especially one that reactivates dormant neurological pathways, the metabolic cost is significantly higher than a standard workout. This isn't soreness, this is adaptation tax, and it is completely normal.
What are your best day 4 recovery protocols? The emergency toolkit, not the generic sleep more and eat protein answer, the specific things you actually do when your body asks for more than you plan to give it. Drop them below. I read every comment on this channel. And then day 5 arrived and something shifted. The movement stopped being something I was doing and became something I was inside of. It's the only way I can describe it. The deliberate robotic computation of days 1 and 2, okay, right hand, left foot, shift weight, extend, dissolved completely. The pattern dropped below conscious threshold. And when that happens, the whole thing transforms into something closer to flow. My camera partner set it on playback before I had to. I could see it myself. Weight transfer smooth, shoulder girdle absorbing load instead of fighting it. The crawl was alive. Think about your own training for a second. What is the most awkward, uncomfortable moment you have had during a movement practice? The moment where you were clearly in that robotic early phase and it felt like your body was working against you. Tell that story below, because normalizing the gap between knowing a pattern and owning it is one of the most important things this community can do for each other. Now, before we move to the data, I want to give you something practical right now, because this one adjustment is the reason most people quietly abandon crawls and go back to machines without telling anyone. Hand placement, specifically knuckle contact point. Your contact should land on the first and second knuckles, your index and middle finger metacarpals, not the flat of the fist, not the third and fourth knuckles, index and middle. This keeps the wrist in true neutral and directs compressive load into the 2 strongest structural columns in your hand. If your wrists are screaming during gorilla crawls, check this first. If you have adjusted and you are still struggling, drop your specific form complaint in the comments and I will reply directly with troubleshooting. That one adjustment took me from 40 seconds of wrist tolerance to over 3 minutes in 2 days. And to answer the question I planted earlier, which muscle group failed me first? It was not the quads, not the shoulders. It was the deep stabilizers of the cervical spine, the muscles holding my head in alignment during the forward-loaded position. By day 2, the back of my neck was the loudest signal in the room. Nobody guesses that, and almost nobody trains it intentionally. Now you know where to look. The science of functional hypertrophy. If you have made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Stay with me through this next section because what I'm about to share is the part that most people training for functional strength never encounter. The 2026 research on muscle fiber activation during loaded quadrupedal movement patterns has produced something that genuinely challenges the operating assumptions of mainstream strength training. Crawling patterns, particularly those involving full body weight shifting under compression across 3 planes, are activating a significantly broader cross-section of slow-twitch and intermediate muscle fibers simultaneously than isolated barbell movements. This is not an argument against barbell work. I train with barbells, but it means gorilla crawls are filling hypertrophy gaps that standard programming systematically leaves wide open. The deep stabilizers, the postural chain muscles that never get a true loading signal from a bench press because the bench is doing the stabilization work for them. The intersegmental spinal muscles, the deep hip rotators. These structures respond to one thing: carrying load across unstable planes. That is the gorilla crawl. I want to open a real debate in the comments. Is crawling a replacement for traditional loading, a complement to it, or an entirely different training category that we do not have proper language for yet? I have a strong position on this, but I want to hear from the science-minded side of this community first. Make the case. Push back on me. Now here's what surprised me most from the Day 6 data. Metabolic cost. I was tracking heart rate through the sessions. A 15-minute gorilla crawl circuit working forward, lateral, and rotational patterns was producing cardiovascular demand comparable to a standard HIIT session. Not identical, but genuinely in that range, from a movement that most people would describe as just crawling. What is your go-to 10-minute movement that burns without feeling like cardio? Drop it below. I'm collecting the best answers for a dedicated follow-up video. But what actually landed hardest for me at the end of Day 6 had nothing to do with the physical data. By Day 6, the cognitive clarity I experienced during crawl sessions was distinctly elevated, not the general endorphin effect from any exercise, a specific quality of focused executive function clarity, the kind of mental state where the right answer to a hard problem surfaces on its own. There's emerging research suggesting cross-lateral ground-based movement patterns specifically activate prefrontal cortical circuits tied to executive function. Crawling may be one of the most underrated cognitive performance tools available to us. Every person watching this right now is working towards something that feels difficult, a goal that is moving slower than you need it to, something you are essentially crawling towards despite the resistance. Tell me what that is. Not your fitness goal, your life goal. The thread below this video is about to become something worth reading. I mean that. Final results and the new blueprint. Day 7. Here's exactly what happened. Hip flexor mobility. The restriction I documented on Day 0, gone. The end range tightness I've carried for nearly 3 years, measurably absent by Day 7. 7 days. Thoracic rotation. The left side deficit reduced significantly. This one I expected to take longer. Thoracic tissue is stubborn. It improved anyway. Wrist load tolerance from 40 seconds on Day 0 to over 4 minutes by Day 7. That's a 10-fold improvement in tissue capacity in 1 week. Not maximum strength, joint tolerance, and connective tissue resilience. Cervical stabilizer endurance, the muscle group that failed first, up from roughly 90 seconds of loaded tolerance to over 6 minutes. I want your vote in the comments right now. Which result is more impressive to you, the mobility gains or the strength endurance numbers? Because I genuinely sit on both sides of that argument. Here's the 2026 Primal Integration Blueprint, the exact model for adding gorilla crawls to whatever you're already doing. Days 1 and 2, pattern acquisition, 5 minutes, forward crawl only, knuckle position, no distance targets, let the pattern be awkward. That awkwardness is your nervous system building new infrastructure. Days 3 and 4, load the frontal plane. 10 minutes, add lateral crawl. Shift your body weight to one side and move perpendicular to your starting direction. Shoulder stability spikes hard here.
Days 5 and 6, three-dimensional integration. 15 minutes, rotational crawl, turning your body 90 degrees mid-pattern. Your nervous system will resist. Move through it. Day 7, full expression. 20-minute session across all 3 planes. Measure how you feel against Day 1. That distance between those 2 moments, that is your data. Now, the question that determines where Primal Unleash goes next. What animal movement do you want me to run the 7-day experiment on next? Leopard crawl, bear crawl, crocodile walk, crab reach, or something I have not thought of yet? Your call entirely.
And here's what I am doing differently this time. The comment with the best argument, not the most likes, the most compelling case for why that specific pattern holds untapped functional strength potential, gets pinned, and that movement becomes the next experiment. Make your case. 7 days ago, I got on this floor and felt the exact distance between what I knew intellectually and what my body could actually do. That gap is humbling. It is also, if you let it be, one of the most motivating things you will ever encounter, because the gap tells you exactly where the growth is waiting. Modern life engineers away every reason to get on the ground, to load weight on all fours, to move through space the way the body was actually designed to move. It gives us 1,000 comfortable reasons to stay in the chair, and that comfort, accumulated over years, is what we're here to dismantle. Every person who dropped a gorilla emoji earlier in this video, come back to this thread in 7 days. Tell this community where you started. Tell them what day 7 looks like. Not for me, for your future self who needs to see that the gap closed. If this gave you something real today, share it with one person who has been sitting too long. That's the only ask. This is Primal Unleashed. This is the Silverback Standard, and subscribe. Modern life makes us soft. Primal movement makes us unbreakable. We don't just lift weight, we reclaim our nature. See you on the ground.